like to invite to the stage Enis Hulli from 500 Startups. If you are not familiar with 500 Startups, I can tell you that they are a globally recognized early stage investor. It's really an honor to have Enis here. He's traveling from San Francisco to Athens and Turkey and London, etc., etc. Enis, please come to the stage. And your topic is scaling the team. When, who to hire for quick growth, challenges of multinational offices, problems faced during scaling, and what one can learn of companies entering the global market. We need Csaba Kákosi from Day One Capital. Day One Capital. Now we can say that Day One Capital is a regional VC firm looking for startups, and Csaba will have this conversation and topic as well. So, gentlemen.
Perfect. So, hi everyone. Great to be here. The format will be a bit weird. While I'm presenting, Csaba will cut me. He's gonna either ask questions, share his experiences, etc. In the meantime, of course, if you have any questions, that'd be great as well. So this session will be about scaling the team, soft landing to the US. What are some of the challenges that our founders face as they go to the US, and how we as a VC help them to overcome that. So 500 Startups is a VC fund in Silicon Valley. We started in 2010. Our mission is to democratize access to capital and know-how around the globe, because we believe there is more entrepreneurs outside the Valley than inside it. We believe there are more entrepreneurs in Europe, actually, compared to Silicon Valley. That's why if we democratize access to capital and the Silicon Valley expertise, a lot of good stuff will come out. That's why 500 Startups started. And what we have done over the past 8 years is we have invested into more than 70 countries, 2,000 companies from 70 countries. I cannot say that we are the best fund. Of course, we're not. I cannot say that we are one of the biggest funds out there. We're not. We're actually tiny. But I can easily say that we are the most global fund out there. You cannot find another fund who have invested into Tokyo, Seoul, Istanbul, Budapest, Mexico, and Montreal at the same time. It just doesn't exist. Hopefully in 10 years, we're going to cover this whole map. I mean, I believe we will. What we've done over the past 8 years is we've invested into more than 2,000 companies in 70 countries, and we have more than 10 unicorns and more than 50 centaurs. And what centaurs means is $100 million companies. That is important because as we invest into places like Turkey or Hungary, we're not shooting for the company to become a unicorn. It doesn't have to become a unicorn. It can actually become a $100 million business, and that's still good enough when you take into account at what point we're investing. That's why centaurs, which are more than $100 million companies, I think is a good benchmark for us to see where we're kind of looking at. So the first thing that I want to discuss is this thing called population paradox, which is a stupid term that I coined. When you look into countries like Israel, Denmark, Netherlands, Estonia, or Sweden, you'll see that a lot of unicorns are coming out of these countries. When you compare that to mid-market countries like France, Italy, Spain, or Turkey, there's less unicorns, and that's pretty weird. The main reason of that is entrepreneurs who are from Estonia or Sweden, they are thinking global. When they're starting a business, they have to sell outside. They cannot just sell to Sweden, and that's their mindset from the get-go, which is not the case in France or in Turkey. And I coined the term population paradox for that. And Eastern Europe can be a good example of that as well, given the small market sizes, small populations. A lot of our deal flow from Eastern Europe are entrepreneurs who are thinking global, who want to become global, who want to open offices in Berlin, London, and San Francisco at the same time, which wasn't the case in Turkey, actually, when we started 2 years ago. In Turkey, we saw a lot of entrepreneurs who were going for the local market, which we hated. Now it's shifting as the macroeconomic situation gets worse and worse in Turkey. Given what's happening, we see a lot of the entrepreneurs do not think of Turkey as a big market, but rather they're trying to have their technology office in Turkey and their sales outside Turkey. Then there's this thing called Renaissance entrepreneurs. These are the entrepreneurs who are the first generation of entrepreneurs in that region. They're the first success stories. They build the first companies who go big, they have their first exits, and they facilitate the know-how transfer. Given that they have LogMe, and for an example, is a good example of that. Given the know-how in that company, how they hire talent here, they're actually facilitating the know-how transfer while letting other entrepreneurs to emerge from that specific company. And our goal at 500 Startups is to invest into companies who are going to become the Renaissance entrepreneurs, and then the exponential growth of the ecosystem will come. PayPal is a good example of that. If you see all these companies, like Tesla, SpaceX, LinkedIn, YouTube, Zenefits, these are either PayPal employees or PayPal founders. This is a great example of the multiplier effect. As these companies occur more and more, a lot of more entrepreneurs come out, and this is what we're trying to achieve from Eastern Europe and Turkey. This is a story of a Turkish guy. How many of you know the company Udemy? We do a lot of advertisement. You have to hear it. Like, we spend shit tons on Facebook. It's an e-learning company. They started in Ankara back in 2006. They were one of the early movers in the WebRTC technology. They were trying to fundraise, they couldn't. They were trying to build a company on e-learning, they couldn't. And then Eren, which is the founder, moved to the Valley in 2007. For 3 years, he worked in a company in Valley, which had a mediocre exit. After that exit, he still had the idea of building an e-learning company. He started again in San Francisco in 2010. We were the first investor at 500. Fast forward 9 years, it's a unicorn now. It raised more than $170 million. And the technology team is still in Ankara. The whole Udemy backend is developed in Ankara, and we see a lot of entrepreneurs coming out of that office. Actually, we've invested into 37 companies in Turkey over the past 2 years. 4 of them are Udemy people, meaning developers or designers or actually business people who worked at Udemy, now moved on to build their own company. This is a story that we're trying to build. So why the US? I mean, if you want to cut me. I'll be really happy when you cut me.
Just one question on that, because our experience with day one is that though it's really true that that kind of an effect of successful entrepreneurs exists, but also on the other hand, I think 80% of our meetings goes with first-time entrepreneurs. So who maybe read about LogMeIn in Hungary, and then they heard about it, they even use Prezi and the others, but they don't have this kind of experience. So how do you see that kind of situation? How can you handle that if a first-time entrepreneur come to you?
When we look into our deal flow and the portfolio, a lot of our portfolio is of course first-time entrepreneurs. But even in that first-time entrepreneurs cluster, we have to divide it into 2. These are either first-time entrepreneurs who are just trying to learn the startup world, or entrepreneurs who worked at Udemy, who worked at LogMeIn, who worked at UiPath. I think someone who's worked at Udemy, it's not a second-time entrepreneur, of course. Being an entrepreneur is much different, but he has a lot of experience. He's much more advanced than an actual first-time entrepreneur who has no experience of working in a startup. That's why as these learning platforms, learning powerhouses emerge, like Udemy, even though they're first-time entrepreneurs, these are going to be much more high-quality first-time entrepreneurs. And that's what we're betting on, basically, trying to bet on. So why the US? Obviously, I hate Trump. That's not why this is here. But why the US? Because we see a lot of our companies, we have 37 of them, 30 of them are targeting the US market directly. I guess there are some reasons for that. It's a huge unified market. It's the single biggest market in the world. I'm not counting China, because when you go to China, you get screwed up. In US, you get screwed up less. It's a one big unified market. Apart from that, there's a lot of early adapters. If you're a company who's trying to get early adapters, potentially the number of early adapters in the US can be bigger than the population of Hungary. So you want to go to early adapters? Voila, here's the US. And then of course fundraising. To be able to become a billion-dollar company, you need to be able to raise tens or 50s or hundreds of millions of dollars. And US is the place for that. But who should go to US? And when I look into a company trying to understand when or should they go to the US, we try to dissect that world into 2. There are companies that are on the blue ocean space, and then there are companies on the red ocean space. Blue ocean companies, zero competition, market is not mature, you cannot actually size the market, but we're not scared of competition, so we can be early. We can take that risk. Red ocean companies, on the other hand, as I've said, much more competitive, tough to scale, hard to differentiate. That's why we invest later. Just to better understand that, Insider is a company of ours in marketing automation. They just raised their Series B from Sequoia. Actually, it's Sequoia's first investment in Central Eastern Europe and Turkey. Marketing automation is red ocean. There's tons of companies, like shit tons of them. So when we invest in a red ocean company, we don't expect them to go to the US right away or go to a mature market right away. They have to scale first. They have to have the product market fit first. They have to get the metrics right. They have to understand their differentiation, and then we try to push them to the US. Not the case for blue ocean companies. In blue ocean companies, and Bot Analytics is a good example. So Bot Analytics is a company that does chatbot analytics, and they started even before Facebook announced their chatbot platform. Imagine doing chatbot analytics while there are no chatbots in the whole fucking world. It's really blue ocean, but the market is not there. Actually, it's been 4 years now. Market is still not there. But there we can take a risk, and these entrepreneurs need early adapters. If you need early adapters, we push you to the US right away, because there are more early adapters there. There's more software spending there, much more than Europe, much more than Turkey. So it really depends on industry maturity, competitors, technology, and the need of early adapters. And then some companies on the red ocean, once they're mature enough, they also try US eventually.
And what if, in spite of all these things, if a startup is betting on Europe, is it still a go for you to invest?
Of course, of course. I think out of our 37 companies, I would say 25 of them or so are just targeting US. Another 10 are either doing Europe, MENA, or Europe, MENA, and some US. And then we only have 3-4 companies that are going for the Turkish local market. So I'd say probably 25% of our portfolio currently targets the European market.
And if someone is targeting Europe, what would be the most important advice for you from your side?
It's a very fragmented market, so we also have to understand how scalable the product is. If the product is scalable, which I'll come to that, then you can become pan-European. You can target Germany, France, England, and Spain at the same time. If it's less scalable, if it's a hyper-local business, much more operational, much more tough to scale, then you cannot be pan-European. You cannot target 7 countries with 7 languages all at the same time, so you have to prioritize. And my advice is try to prioritize the best way you can, because potentially you may dominate Germany and never be able to get to France. So choose which country you're going after.
Actually, is there a B2B or B2C preference at 500 startups?
I mean, we don't have a preference, but 80% of our portfolio is B2B. And that's mainly because as we're trying to invest into global success stories from places like Hungary or Turkey, it's really tough to become successful in B2C. The reasons are A, B2C is mostly winner takes it all, so you're betting that your company will become the winner, that's tough. B2B is much more fragmented. Think about cloud, think about all the SaaS providers. In the world, you can be the 10th biggest and you're still big enough. You can be the 20th biggest cloud provider, you're potentially still a billion-dollar company. Not the case with B2C. So although we don't have a preference, I see us going towards B2B more and more. So as an investor, and this is what we're trying to do, I think this is what you're trying to do as well, we're trying to invest into Hungarian founders who are going to make it in the US, or Turkish founders who are going to make it in Germany and UK. That's weird because we're taking 2 market risks at the same time. I mean, that's a really tough investment thesis. And we're using this geo-arbitrage potential. What geo-arbitrage means is we invest in a company that's in the Hungarian value chain, and once we take that company out of the Hungarian value chain, put it in the US, the valuation jumps. And hopefully they're going to be able to fundraise from the US. But what's the potential here? Why would a US VC invest into a Hungarian founder or a Hungarian team? I mean, wherever I go, they say our talent is great, we have cheap talent, but I think talent is cheaper than Silicon Valley anywhere except Silicon Valley. So even if you go to Nepal or Bangladesh or India, they're going to say our talent is cheap. It is cheap. What comes with having cheap talent is early sustainability. A lot of our companies can get to early sustainability really fast, which gives them unlimited runway, and now they can do multiple pivots. Why that's important is a lot of the B2B SaaS companies, they don't become successful with a single product market fit. They have to find at least 4 or 5 different product market fits in a span of 5 to 10 years, and then they become Twilio, and then they become Intercom. So as we invest into blue ocean companies, we hope that they're going to get to early sustainability fast, because they're based in Hungary, and then they're going to pivot 5 times, 6 times, 10 times. They're going to pivot much more than a US competitor can, and that's how Twilio is going to come out. That's how Intercom or Bot Analytics is going to come out from this region. I think what's also important is, in the US, you have to be at the right time with the right team and right product, of course, but timing is a big issue. You cannot be too early. If you're too early to a market in the US, to sustain in the market for 3 years would take millions of dollars. You cannot do that. So timing is important. Not the case in Hungary or Turkey. That's why we want to invest into blue ocean companies. Even if you're too early to the market, you can actually sustain for 3 years because you're sustainable much more faster. And once you sustain for 3 years, once the market is mature enough, potentially, you're the best positioned. And that's what we're trying to bet on. So what companies should go to the US, or should scale, and what companies shouldn't? A big cluster of that would be hyperlocal businesses. Think about Uber versus Airbnb. Both of them are transactional marketplaces where the transaction happens offline. But in Uber's case, the buyer is local, the seller is local. The buyer is in Hungary, the seller is in Hungary. The buyer is in Turkey, the seller is in Turkey. Once there is that hyperlocal dynamic, Uber couldn't scale. Uber actually got thrown out of every single market. They had to buy Careem yesterday. They bought Careem, this Middle Eastern company, for $3 billion yesterday. They had to merge with Didi in China. They had to merge with Grab in Southeast Asia. Get actually acquired them, their Russian operations, and they merged with Get in Russia. They had to because it's a hyper-local business. It's really tough to scale globally, given the operational dynamic. Not the case with Airbnb. With Airbnb, because the buyer is in Istanbul, the seller is in Barcelona, the buyer is in Toronto, the seller is in Budapest. Given that cross-culture, cross-nation transactions, Airbnb is much more scalable and defensible than Uber. That's why they scale globally, Uber cannot. Same goes for any company that's doing, like Intuit is an accounting company, or any payment provider, anything that's regulatory issued, that has to be local. We believe these are hyper-local businesses, and they can never become global. They can be multinational, meaning they can be successful in Turkey and Germany and France at the same time. They can do 1, 2, 3, even 4 countries, but they can never be truly global. And it's really important to understand that. And once we understand that, we make the decision to push them to the US or not accordingly. We see this also transition from horizontal services to vertical products. How many of you know this company, OpsGenie? Ever heard of it? Turkish company, exited to Atlassian for $300 million last year. It was founded three and a half years ago. So 3.5 years, close to zero funding. They only raised one small round of funding. They got acquired for $300 million. And what they were doing was they were doing end-to-end IT infrastructure. While they were doing this horizontal service, which is really tough but commoditized, cannot be scalable, no one would invest, then they found this one niche, and that niche is incident management. If you focus on incident management in IT infrastructure, meaning if there's a problem in the IT infrastructure, who's going to be notified? How is she or he going to be notified? And did she or he solve that issue? It's maybe 1% of what you do while you're doing IT infrastructure. They productized it, they scaled really fast, and then they sold for $300 million. They were in red ocean. As they productized their red ocean services into a blue ocean product, they were able to go to the US. They grew really fast in the US and then sold for $300 million. And these are just 2 other examples of that same thing. So if you're a services company focusing on a single product now, which you believe is in blue ocean, we try to push those companies to the US too. So lastly, it's important to know the disadvantages and advantages as we invest into these countries. As we invest into Hungary, for an example, talent is an advantage, it's here. Cost is an advantage, have your talent and technology office here. Trying to find sales and marketing people, it's a disadvantage. Don't try to do it here, do it in the US. Fundraising is a disadvantage. Potentially find your fundraising in the US. Early adapters, early customers, disadvantage. Try to find them in the US. So understand what's your advantage and what's your disadvantage, and depending on that, you have to become a cross-border company. So scaling the team is tough. To be able to scale the team, an entrepreneur should first scale him or herself. And a lot of the times I see that entrepreneur becomes the bottleneck, where entrepreneurs, although he or she is working 18 hours a day, he cannot scale himself. He doesn't have any free time, and that sucks. An entrepreneur should first scale himself and then think about scaling the organization, because the founder's job is to remove obstacles. And on day 1, that obstacle is product. You work on product. Day 2, that's customers. You work on customers. Day 3, maybe it's team. You have to start building the team. Day 4, it's fundraising. You need more resources to build the team, so the founder just focuses solely on fundraising. So scale yourself, find the obstacle, and then try the way to remove it. And then delegate. And as a founder delegates, this comes organizational structure mess. And organizational structures, if not done strategically, they're fucked up. It's really try to move away from them. Once you set an organizational structure in a way, to be able to start from scratch would take 2 years and millions of dollars. That's why, as we're speaking with entrepreneurs, as they're going to more than 15 or 20 employees, we try to envision what the organizational structure should look like.
Yeah, actually, how is it done in practice? So I mean, if 500 startup invests, so what can you do for a company to really have a good structure inside in the company?
First of all, I think it all starts with scaling the founder himself. When I look into the founder's calendar, he only has 2 meetings a day, and he has 8 hours of free time. In those 8 hours, he tries to think what's going to happen in a year from now, what's going to happen in 2 years from now. That's how long of a runway he has. So he has a lot of time to try to understand which organizational structure is the best for the company. And it really depends. If this is a sales-oriented company, then that's what you should focus on. If this is a product-oriented company, which not many companies are, I think a lot of companies, they start as products, but after year 2, they have to become sales companies. Fuck the product. Product team is less important after 2 years. So an effective way of that would be, I think, at least in the startups that we try to build, would be the Oracle one. Have a big cluster team of sales company, and the CEO actually takes care of that sales team more and more, and the other co-founder takes care of the technology team, which takes less effort. But of course, it all depends. It depends on what the company is. If the company is a business to developer platform, where your core product is much more important than anything else, then this would be different. But that's rarely the case, I would say. And it all starts with delegating. So first, the founder needs to learn how to delegate, what not to delegate, what to micromanage, and when something is not that important, you have to start delegating. If you delegate too early, you might fail. If you delegate too late, then you as the founder, you become the bottleneck in the organization because everything runs by you.
And how do you see that how many of your founders is really up to this task? Because our experience in many cases that it's a very hard learning curve for our founders to simply accept the fact that it's very different to run a company of 5 people to 15 or 50 and 100 and 150. So they're completely different stories, and there is a very hard and tough learning curve how to accommodate this change within the organization. So what can you do to help them to simply run this process successfully?
First of all, I think we suck at this. And I realize this more and more because as I look into our founders, and I try to do this with some founders that I see are not scaling themselves, I said, hey, for a month, let's just count hours. How many hours do you spend on sales and talking to sales and marketing? How many hours do you spend on hiring? How many hours do you spend on fundraising? So for a month, we try to understand what their time breakdown is. And then we try to prioritize. So we try to see, is this aligned with the company priorities? If the company's priorities is to sell, and as a founder you're only spending 20% of your time on sales-oriented stuff, then that's wrong. We have to kind of stop that. We have to do 90% sales. Fuck fundraising. Who cares about fundraising? Fuck customer relations. Who cares about the customer? If that's your priority. So, and as more time passes by, I see that our founders lack prioritization. They can't actually go up, try to see from a macro view what's the priority in the company, and then how they should allocate their own time depending on that. There are some founders in our portfolio, I think 20-30% of them, that are doing it very good. I mean, I cannot say a thing about them, but the rest, 60-70% of the founders, I think they have a tough time prioritizing, tough time managing their own time, and then, I was gonna say something else. Oh, tough time delegating for sure, and that comes with time management. They delegate less, where they should have delegated much more because they're risk-averse, but they shouldn't be risk-averse. They should be all in delegating.
And what if, worst case scenario, if a founder fails? So what if you find that he's just not up to the task?
Nothing we can do about that. It can only impact our follow-on decision. And actually, this was a discussion that I had with my partner this morning. Which founders let the company alone? So we're not talking about the company. We're not talking about the market. We're not talking about how much they're fundraising. Just pure founders. If you look at the founders, which ones are the best? Which ones would definitely like to invest the next follow-on of millions of dollars, and which ones we don't? We see that out of 37, there's like 10 of them, I would say, 10 to 12 of them, where we're like, okay, whatever money we have, we can just give it to this guy or girl because we believe in them. But the rest, we're still not sure, because as you correctly said, the person to run a 10-people company may not be the person to run a 50-people company. The person to run a 50-people company potentially is not the person to run the 1,000-people company. Even in our case in Udemy, this guy, where is that guy? There's a good-looking guy. This guy. So even in our case with Udemy, as the company scaled, Eren was removed being CEO. And you see this happening over and over again. Whether you look into Google or Apple or Twitter, CEOs get removed. Whether that's at Series B level, C level, or D level changes. But that's natural, that's okay. As long as this doesn't happen too early on, as long as this happens after your Series B, after your 100-people team doing millions of dollars per year, then it's fine. So Donald Trump, why do I have this guy here? A lot of cultural issues also arise. As our companies move from Hungary to US, for an example, we have two different sets of cultural issues. Cultural issue number one, how to get used to the US. Get used to Donald Trump, get used to beer pongs, get used to Super Bowl, and that's tough. To be able to accommodate that, what we try to do is, as a founder moves to the US, we try to take him or her into the 500 Startups ecosystem. We have an accelerator in the US, they can go and benefit from the accelerator to be a part of the community, and they get used to the culture. The second one is to have the cross-border cultural evening, meaning the culture in the Hungary office should be the same as the culture in the San Francisco office. That's also tough to maintain. So to be able to do that, we try to hire international people in the local offices. If you go to our companies in Turkey, you'd see the language of speaking is English, it's not Turkish, because we hired international people from early on. We do flexible working. What that means is any developer in our Turkey office can spend time in the San Francisco office of that same company, however he or she wants. So sometimes they go for a month, they spend a month in San Francisco and then they come back to Turkey. This kind of facilitates, bridges the culture between the two offices. What we also do, and what was I going to say? Oh, what we also do, and we try to do this also more and more, is to hire people in the US fast. Even if you don't need that many people in the US, you as a co-founder alone is enough. Don't do that. Just hire 2 people. That's gonna become your US team. So you're a 3-people team oriented towards the mission. Don't be alone. So even if there's a good sales and marketing people in Hungary, which is much more cheaper, don't do that. Go and hire the more expensive people in the US because that's better for your culture. That's better for your soft landing. And then a lot of the time, like Mark from Avatar, when they go to San Francisco, they feel alone. This is like one alone dude walking near a bridge, doesn't know what the fuck he's gonna do with his life. That's why we use 500. That's why 500, more than 100 people, 2,000 portfolio companies. You are a part of a community. That's what we're trying to give. And they always say that it is much more easier to fundraise in Silicon Valley, but in the caption, it also says, if you are from the Valley. It's really tough for a Hungarian entrepreneur to go to Silicon Valley alone and try to fundraise. It just doesn't happen. It only happens after Series A. After you're doing millions per year, you've validated the team, validated the product, validated everything, then it's much easier. So what we advise our founders to do is, if you're raising a couple $1 million round in the US, don't try to find a VC who's gonna lead the round. Try to find 10s of them, try to find 20s of them, bundle them together, and at the end, the founder almost leads the round. We see that investors in the US, as they're investing 300K to $1 million per company, they don't do due diligence, they're less detailed oriented. So a lot of our companies who raise from these big names, for example, Firefly, a company that raised $32 million this year from Lightspeed and Google Ventures, in their initial round, they didn't let anyone lead the round. They just took 10 different VCs, took 300 to 500K checks from all 10 of them because there's so much capital. This is a seller's market. So I think San Francisco is the only seller's market where the entrepreneur has the leverage. There are hundreds of VC funds out there. It's the only market. Wherever else you go, whether that's Budapest or Istanbul, it's a buyer's market. People who have the money dictate the terms. Time is our friends. We don't have to be fast. We just be slow, see how the company goes, and then decide to invest or not. That's what Chaba does. That's what we do, unfortunately. Not the case in the Valley. That's why we try to, after we invest, advise them to go to the Valley. And if you're not using that as a leverage, meaning if you're not bundling 20 investors together into the same room, into the same term sheet, then you're just not taking that advantage, and it's a big advantage.
What is that? What's the size of the round that is needed for real to have a real possibility to go to the US? I mean, what you said in the last couple of minutes, that you should spend a lot of time in the US. You should hire people in the US. You should have a permanent presence in the US. You should talk to VCs in the US. So what is really that? I mean, I know that's a silly question to put a number on it, but in spite, I tried. So what is the minimum size of round, that minimum development stage of the company when it's really feasible to do?
Initially, when we started, we thought that we're going to invest around 200K to 300K to a company, and then they're going to do their next round in the US. Not happening. Doesn't work that way. So now what we're trying to do is the company should raise their first million to 1.5 million locally, meaning Europe, Turkey, wherever they're based at. And then once they're trying to raise their $3 million-ish round, they should still have around 50% or a bit less committed from existing investors or local investors from Europe, and then try to find the rest in the US. It's much easier. If you have 50% of your fundraising committed, and you try to speak with VCs in the US, there's a lot of VCs that are willing to write a couple 100K checks right away. So I think a good time to go to US would be after you raise at least $1 million. And then when you're raising your 3 to 5 million, you should have, I guess, 30 to 50% of that round committed, and then try to fill the rest with US VCs. And you don't have to fill it with US VCs, but we advise our companies to do so because that's better for their onboarding. That's better for their future as they're going to raise their Series B or C.
Is it a precondition for the US investors to have a US company? What is your
mostly
experience?
No. I'd say 90% no. It's a precondition for US VCs for you to be based there, for sure. I think that's what I wrote it here. So this is a proximity-based business. A lot of the VCs only invest into their 40-mile radius. Meaning, if a VC is based in Silicon Valley, they don't want to invest into Los Angeles. A funny example, Social Capital, this big VC fund, they launched this fund called Capital as a Service, which does international investments. Do you know how they define international? Anything that's not based in Silicon Valley or New York is international. So if you're a Seattle-based entrepreneur, American guy from Seattle, from Connecticut, from Miami, you apply to social capital, you're not going to get funding from social capital's main fund, you're going to get from international fund. That's how proximity-based business this is. So I think proximity is very important. For you to be based in the valley, to raise from valley is really important. But where that entity is located, matters less, as long as it's an okay-ish entity. EU entity works well, UK works well, Turkey doesn't work well. Exits. So exits is a big issue, and it's part of the reason why we want to move companies to the US, because we see the exit and the liquidity potential much more. Now I'm going to dive into 4 different categories of exits. And the reason I do that is, as a founder and as a fund manager, of course, when we invest into companies, we try to understand what kind of an exit they can have in the future. So the first type, which is not that good, that's why I have this girl here, is acqui-hires. So a company that's going on just to acquire the team. They don't care about the product, they don't care about revenues, they don't care about your user base, they just want to get the team. So this is M&A as an HR strategy. And Facebook has done a lot of those, Google has done a lot of those, Twitter has done a lot of those. This is not good for the investors, you don't make money, but at least you get your money back, so it brings liquidity to the market. And 99% of the acqui-hires happen in the US, unfortunately. We don't see that many acqui-hires happening in Europe or even in the UK. Second type, which is a bit better, that's why I have the King Obama here, product plus team acquisition. Meaning a company like Google acquiring Firebase and also getting their team while also letting the product live. Same goes for Twitter, Periscope, Facebook Parse, Twitter Wine, all the same example. These are okay exits, you make money. A lot of these exits also happen in the US just because a lot of these acquirers are based in the US. It's Facebook acquiring a company, it's Google acquiring a company. This is good exits, you make money. Third one would be expansion exits, and expansion can be in 3 things, meaning segment, geography, or channel. If it's a segment exit, let's say Salesforce, that does a lot of enterprise SaaS, goes on to acquire Demandware, which is doing retail because they want to go to retail. They think their customer base in retail is beneficial for Salesforce. That's a segment exit. Second would be geography. Trendyol, this is a Turkish company, which was acquired by Alibaba last year for $1 billion. They want to come to the Turkish market. They acquired a Turkish giant for $1 billion. Perfect. Third would be channel. So Walmart goes and acquires Jet.com because Walmart is the king of offline and they need online channels. Rather than building their own online channels, they try to buy companies who have built that online channel. That's a channel acquisition. These are great exits. You make good multiples, as the kid suggests. And the fourth one would be existential threat, meaning you either buy this company or this company will come and fuck you. WhatsApp. As Facebook, you either buy WhatsApp or potentially WhatsApp's gonna get even bigger than you. Same goes for Instagram, Facebook, same goes for YouTube, Google. These are existential threat exits. You buy or you die. Here, there are no multiples. These are all billion dollar companies. These are companies, they do 0 revenue, they get sold for $20 billion. We see this happening a lot in the US too. So as we invest into companies, we try to see whether this can be an acqui-hire, whether this can be a product exit. Where are these product synergies? Who would like to buy this product and bundle it with its own suite? Whether there's a critical channel where a company might actually buy the channel. And of course, whether that company can be an existential threat to other big giants out there. Thank you. It was a pleasure. And if you have any questions, I'll give you a